In today's episode of the RAW Edit, we're going to start with this image in RAW format, and after doing all our edits with Lightroom Classic, we're going to finish here. Hello amigos! During the winter months, thousands and thousands of cranes come to spend the winter here in the central part of the state of New Mexico. And I love photographing the cranes and the geese that come join us during the winter months. Now, many times we're going to see photos of cranes and geese flying from one side of the image to the other, like this one. Very nice image, very nice pose, very nice light. Other times, we're going to get a different pose, but also flying from one side of the image to the next. And I've been looking for something different. So in one occasion, I was able to position myself with the wind behind my back. And why is that important? Because, cranes and geese and many birds, just like airplanes, they like to take off and land against the wind. So if we have the wind against our back, the cranes and the geese are going to fly mostly in our direction and will allow us to take these images with them flying towards us. And that's what I was looking for. The other thing that I like is that I had the sun behind me and to the side. So it also provides very nice light. So what I like about this image and why I selected it? Well, I like the extended wings of the bird, but they also kind of have a fold towards the second half of the wing. I like that the head is coming down, is not a straight aligned with the body, because if that had been the case, then the head and the beak will be completely lost. We just have no good perspective. I also like that the legs are extended. It's a good sign that the crane was coming in for landing. And I always start with what is my plan of attack for this image. And the first thing I want to do is look at a nice crop, perhaps a panel that takes advantage of the extended positions of the wing. In that crop, I also want to provide a sense that the crane was coming from top to bottom, looking for a place to land. And then with the edits, what we're going to try to do is separate the crane from the background. And we're going to do that with transitions or changes of light, color, and texture to make the crane pop out from the image. So let's start with the edit. So the first thing is we're going to do the crop. We go to the develop module, crop. With the letter O, you can cycle through the different grids. I like this grid because as I select a 16:9 crop and make it a little smaller, I can now count the number of squares from wingtip to the edge of the photo to try to center the bird left to right. With the letter L, we can turn off the lights in Lightroom and get a better view of the crop. Right now, I like the left to right, but I think the bird is a little too low on the crop. So I'm going to bring it up. This is too high. It just gets too crowded on the top part of the image. I'm going to come down a bit. I'm also going to rotate the image a little bit so that the tip of the fold is even on both wings. And I think that's going to give us a good balance. Letter L again, we return to Lightroom. Let's lock that crop. And that by itself, I think, did a great job of putting more attention on the bird. So now let's do some basic edits. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little warmer. I'm going to bring the exposure up, bring the highlights down, perhaps bring the whites down a little bit, open the shadows, and holding the Alt key and moving the blacks, I want to get a good black point until I see a few black pixels. And that's going to give me a lot of contrast on the image. I'm going to increase the exposure a little bit more. So that's our basic edit. One beauty of Lightroom is that we have many options for doing masks. So now let's start using masks. And the first one is I'm going to go to select subject, and it did a very nice job of selecting the crane. Now, nice but not perfect. And this is where that's the first step. Anytime we create masks or use the AI mask, is to look around our subject to see the areas in which Lightroom needed a little help. And the help usually is by subtracting or adding, we're gonna refine the mask. And to do that, we click on mask, and in this case, I'm gonna subtract with the brush. I'm gonna make sure I have auto mask turned on and the flow at 100%. And now I just start erasing the parts that Lightroom had selected by mistake. And I'm gonna accelerate the video so I don't bore you with all these refinements of the mask. Okay, so now we have a better mask for our bird. What I want to do, as I was telling you, is use transitions or changes in texture, in light, and in color to make our subject, in this case the crane, stand out more from the background. And what we're going to do is start with light. I'm going to bring the exposure up a little bit, bring the highlights down because I don't want to lose detail on the wings. And in color, I'm going to make it cooler. Just a touch. We don't want to go nuclear here. Light-handed. Something like 10, 12 points negative towards the blue. And then in saturation, we're going to increase the saturation. And on effects, I'm going to give it a dash of texture and a little bit of clarity, something like 10, 15 points clarity. We have to be really careful because it can make our subject not look natural at all. So something like 10, 15 points, that helps. So if I turn that mask off, that was before, and this is on. One thing that the cranes have is the red forehead and the yellow eyes, and I want those to stand up a little bit more. So I'm going to create a new mask with a brush, and I'm going to paint on the forehead, I'm going to paint on the head. I'm going to refine the mask a little bit because I went over. And in that area, I'm going to bring the tone, the exposure up. On color, we're going to give it quite a bit of saturation to make that forehead and eyes pop a little bit more. And that by itself just gets the attention into that part of the head. The next thing I want to do is select the background. And instead of doing select background as a mask option, what I'm going to do is go to the mask we had already created for the crane, and we spend time refining it. So we go to the three dots and I'll say duplicate and invert. And that's going to give us a better selection of the background, taking advantage of the refinements we had already done. On that mask, what I'm going to do is I wanted to play with the light of the crane. And I usually go down, that's too much. Sometimes going a little bit up, especially if you had dark edges on your main subject, going up may work. Something like that, just a touch of going up. I'm gonna bring the highlights down. But in color, we had made the crane a little blue, we're gonna make the background a little yellow. We don't want to go too much, a little yellow. We're gonna increase the saturation, something like that. And now it looks almost like a fall scene, but the bird is really standing out from the background. And the other thing I'm going to do is negative texture and a little bit of negative clarity. That's going to soften the background. If I turn the background mask on or off, so this is off, this is on, we can see now how the crane really stands out a little bit more from the background because we had that difference in color and in texture. Next, I want to take advantage of the falls, the light, and the shadows that we have on the bird, trying to bring out a little more of a 3D effect. And for that, I'm going to create a new mask with the brush. I'm going to turn off auto mask. I'm going to reduce the flow to something like 20, 25 points. And now I want to paint. I'm going to go to tone and bring it to like -3, -5, something like that. And I want to enhance the shadows as if the light is coming around the edge of the wing, and then a little more shadow as the wing gets into the back. So I'm going to do one pass, and the more passes that we do, the more buildup of the shadow we're doing. So if I turn the mask on, we were very light on this front part and a little more, couple passes on the back. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Now a couple passes on this part and maybe 3 passes on this other side. Also, this part of the body, I'm going to make it a little darker. And now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to create a new mask with the brush, but now we're going to go positive on the exposure, something like 0.5. And we're going to paint light now on the edges where the light hits directly, this section of the wing, a little more on this part, this section of the wing here, a little more, and perhaps in these parts right here. So if I turn off and on all the mask, this was before our mask, and this is now with the mask. We had really made the crane stand out from the background, and with a little bit of dash and burn, tried to give the bird a little more of a 3D effect. Finally, I'm going to do a vignette, so create a new mask with the radial gradient, center on the crane, something like that. We're going to select invert, and now I'm going to reduce the exposure attached, something like 0.3 or so. I don't like to go too much. 0.3, 0.4, and to balance bringing the exposure down, I like to bring the highlights up a bit. Again, if we turn on and off the mask, this is the effect that we had created. So that's everything for the mask. Finally, this photo was taken at ISO 800, so I had very little noise. I didn't need to use the AI denoise in Lightroom, but we're gonna go to detail, go to 100%. I'm going to increase the amount of sharpening. I'm going to press in the Alt key, move masking until the detail on the background disappears, basically shows black, and the only detail that is showing in white is on the bird. That means sharpening is only applied in those areas and we're not enhancing the noise. And talking about noise, very little noise at ISO 800. So I'm going to just bring the luminance noise a touch. We don't want to go too high because then we may lose a lot of detail on the bird. So yes, a little bit of luminance noise correction. And here is the final image. So we took advantage of the bird coming in our direction. We use a good pano crop 16:9 to take advantage of the extended wings. Position the bird a little bit high to have that sense that the bird is coming down. And then we use differences in color, texture, and light to make the bird stand out and really have it almost like popping out of the screen. Well, amigos, I hope you liked today's raw edit. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you liking the content. Tell your friends about my channel, helping me grow. Send me your comments or ideas for future videos, and I'll see you next time.